Welcome back to the channel where it's time for us to make our picks for Week 2 of the NFL season. And how about those Week 1 games? From the Lions beating the Chiefs, to the Niners and Cowboys having statement games right out the gate, to Aaron Rodgers' season being over almost as soon as it started, there were so many juicy storylines to choose from opening week. For the record, we were 10-6 on our picks, and the slide picks were 8-8 for the first and last iteration of that nonsense. How'd you do with your picks? Let us know in the comments section, and what you think of the matchups are for Week 2. Let's get rolling with those picks. How about that Thursday night matchup? Primetime Kirko Chains had yet another statistically awesome game, but in a losing effort. It's amazing in a game that was that close in spite of all the turnovers, and Philly was fortunate to fly out of there with a win. It seems as though the Vikings just need to clean up a few things to get the wins to start rolling in, but it needs to happen before the hole gets too much deeper. And Philly needs to pile up the wins early because the brutal part of their schedule hits late. The Pack visits the ATL this week for a showdown of teams that have switched starting quarterbacks from 2022. Do you think the dropout for the Packers and losing Rodgers would be steeper than the Falcons moving on from Mariota? But if Week 1 was any indication, that is not the case. Jordan Love looked comfortable in his Packer debut and taking the baton of ownership from the Bears from Aaron Rodgers, and Ritter looked shaky against a young undermanned Carolina squad. But again, Week 1 is like a fourth preseason game that counts toward the season record. The Pack should pull away late in this one. Is there a star player in the NFL that's taking more heat right now than Josh Allen? I really can't think of one, and he deserves it. He's way too reckless with the ball in situations where he doesn't need to put the team on his shoulders, and it's clear by the statements from other Bills to the media that they aren't going to let things get out of control before Allen hears the rumblings from behind the curtain. This could be a huge trap game for the Bills if they waltz in thinking the Raiders will roll over. The Silver and Black are coming off a big divisional win in Denver, and they're out to prove that things are different in Vegas this year. I see the Bills with a nice get-right win here, but something bugs me about this one. I won't be shocked if the Raiders steal this one, causing panic in the streets of Buffalo. There were some teams that looked out of sync in Week 1, and the Bengals were definitely one of those teams. Baltimore didn't look as dominant as I thought they would against Houston either, so I'll default to the division matchup mentality for this one. Baltimore has a chance to establish themselves as an early division favorite, but losing J.K. Dobbins complicates that a little. And the Bengals, with the home game and the prospect of starting 0-2 in the division staring them in the face, I think they're going to take this one at home and keep things muddled in the AFC North. Will the real Seattle Seahawks please stand up? I think everyone had a what-the-heck moment when the Rams went into Seattle and put a spanking on the Seahawks, and some doubts in the minds of the 12s. They do have some O-line issues to contend with, though, and the road doesn't get any easier heading into Ford Field to face a confident Lions team that's coming off a huge season-opening win at KC. I know, the Chiefs didn't have Kelsey and Jones, but they did have Mahomes, and that was definitely a quality win no matter who was on the field. Looking for Detroit to put the heat on the Seahawks and run away with this one, just like the Rams did last week. So this game is my lesser of two evils game for the week. Both the Chargers and Titans are teams that don't seem to have finishing power. The Chargers historically so, and the Titans appear to play just below the level of their competition for about the last year or so. Both teams had golden opportunities last week and didn't get it done. I absolutely don't trust the Chargers not to charger a victory into a loss, but I will reluctantly pick them to win this week simply because they have much more firepower on offense, and I'm already nervous about this pick. Speaking of panic buttons, the Bears and Bucks game is thankfully in Florida this week since there's huge anxiety storm clouds parked over Chicago this week and ready to burst. Look for a chance to bring back Rex Grossman if the Bears fall to 0-2 this week. Not that I think it's justified, since it's going to take some time for the new look Bears offense to start clicking together. They do need to start showing some signs of improvement, however, and need to mix some early wins to keep that hope alive. The Bucks are coming off a huge road win in Minnesota where Baker looked decent in that game, and the Bucks did what they needed to do to get out of town with a W. They still have a talented roster, and I think Tampa wins this game to go 2-0 and set the Chicago sports scene ablaze. I can't wait for this huge Week 2 tilt between the defending champion Chiefs and Jaguars team that pushed them in the playoffs last year. KC gets Kelsey back, but unsure at what capacity, and Jones was re-signed, which will give the Chiefs a huge lift on defense and take some of the heat off the back end. Jacksonville's looking to prove that last year was no fluke, and the payoff of the addition of Calvin Ridley was already apparent last week, which will open it up for Kirk Etienne and the gang for more opportunities to make plays. I'm actually going to call this one for the Jags in a nail-biter, but the Chiefs are far from dead even if they open the season 0-2. And in our snooze fest of the week, we have the Colts headed to Houston to take on the Texans in a battle of first-round rookie quarterbacks. Richardson took a pounding last week in Indy, and he'll need to clean that up if he wants to keep Uncle Rico on the bench. Stroud is a possible scratch after being dinged up a bit, which could put Davis Mills back at the helm, who performed decently as a starter last year for the Texans. With home field and the possibility of a backup quarterback being a blessing in disguise, I'll take the Texans in a narrow victory, which with every loss makes the Jonathan Taylor saga look even more and more interesting. The 49ers head to their southern home at SoFi Stadium to face a Rams squad that had a surprisingly dominant victory up in Seattle last week. Unfortunately for the Rams, the 49ers had a less surprising and even more dominant victory on the road in Pittsburgh. Aside from the NFC title game 2 years ago, the Niners have had the Rams' number with Shanahan and McVay at the helms respectively, and I see no reason for that to change this game. Stafford will face a drastic upgrade in defense this week and make life miserable for what is likely to be a proud but overmatched Rams squad. Niners in a cakewalk, just as long as Brock Purdy stays healthy. In what would normally be a snooze fest of the week contender, this matchup does not qualify for that moniker. In a rare Week 2 must-win game, the Giants travel to Glendale to face the predicted to do nothing but suck Cardinals, who had a respectable showing against Washington last week. After getting embarrassed 40-0 by Dallas at home last week, and on the heels of the Jets losing Rodgers for the year, New York critics will swarm like locusts on a Giants facility if they lose to Arizona, who are thought to be the worst team in the league by most pundits. The pressure will be palpable in this one, and I'd love to see the Giants lose just for the drama, but I think the Giants will pull out a narrow victory to keep the Wolves at bay, at least for a little while. Speaking of New York, the Zach Wilson-led Jets mosey on down to Arlington to face the Cowboys, who are on cloud nine after that beatdown they laid on the Giants. Will overconfidence be a factor this week? Hard to say, but Dallas had best not take the Jets lightly. Though Wilson is a clear drop-off from Rodgers, all indications are that Zach has made strides in his development. I would expect Dallas to bring the heat early and often, so it'll be imperative for Wilson to get the ball out quick and try to stay turnover-free. The Jets' defense is upper echelon, so don't look for a runaway in this game. I could see the Jets pulling an upset if a totally clean game is played, but I think Dallas has just a few too many horses on offense, and the Pokes will eke out a victory. So this one's a bit of a head-scratcher for me. Washington visits Denver in a game that doesn't inspire a lot of enthusiasm for someone that isn't bought into either team. The Commanders did just enough to beat Arizona last week, while the Broncos lost their home opener by a point to the hated Raiders. Flipped a coin a few times and decided that since the game's at Mile High, and the Broncos laid an egg in their home opener last week, and with Let's Ride Russ and Sean Payton under the heat lamp, we'll call this one a Broncos victory. In this Sunday night divisional matchup, Miami has won 4 of the last 5 games against the Patriots and traveled to Foxborough to face the Pats on the heels of their shootout victory comeback against the Chargers last week, where Tua looked awesome. New England, on the other hand, played a great second half and fell just short in their comeback bid at home against Philly, and Mac Jones looked pretty good himself. There's a chance for some adverse weather in the game, which could limit the Cheetah, and the Pats' D at home will pose more of a challenge than the Chargers' defense did, which is to say they'll actually pose a challenge. This should be a fun one, and I look for the Hoodie and Company to pilfer a close one from Miami and even their records at 1-1 apiece. So you gotta love the Monday Night Twin Bills. In Game 1, the Saints are in Charlotte to see if the Panthers can even start pounding against their division rivals from the Big Easy. Derek Carr's coming off a decent game in last week's snooze fest where they took care of the Titans at home. They'll be facing a young and rebuilding Panthers squad that's looking to establish their identity with the rookie signal caller at the helm that's coming off a loss to Atlanta in another quasi-snooze fest game. Going with the Saints in this one, though it probably won't be a walkover on the road against Carolina. And to wrap up Week 2, the Cleveland Browns, fresh off their home win against Cincinnati, travels to Pittsburgh to face a Steelers squad that's anxious to get the taste of that beatdown out of their mouths against their heated rivals. Yeah, it's going to be tough, though, if the Browns' D plays like it did last week against the Bengals. You know Myles Garrett's always full tilt for Steeler Week, so there better be a blocking or rollout plan for Pickett, or he'll see more of what he saw last week, which is the grass. I'm really on the fence about this one, but since I have to choose, I'm pretty sure I'll go with the Steelers. They looked like crap, so I'm going to go with Cleveland in this one. So that's all, folks. What do you think? Are we going to go 16-0, or is it back to the drawing board? Let us know what you think, and give us your picks on any or all games on this week's slate. Since you made it this far, please like the video so we know we did a good job, and as always, enjoy the games, give opposing fans a bunch of grief, and come back next week for Week 3 with no KUDOS Sports.